Hello everyone, my name's Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX06, and EX6 offers us lots of new and powerful tools in order to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is one that hasn't been updated in quite a while, but it's a fan favorite, and that's going to be the Diaboromon deck. So if you're unfamiliar with what Diaboromon is doing, because it's, well, been quite a while, he is a stack-based deck, and what he's doing and the mechanics that he's playing around with, outside of just some of your general black mechanics, is the fact that he is a token, flood, and swarm deck, so he wants to spawn a whole bunch of tokens and be able to use them for some really good offensive and defensive plays, which is what makes him highly versatile to begin with, especially with the correct setup, and if you're able to move fast enough, he could potentially steamroll the game in your favor. But the deck isn't without its weaknesses, and even though he got some really good new support, he still has some very glaring flaws, which is the reliance on the tokens in order to do much of anything. So if the opponent is able to either remove all of the tokens all at once, or just stop the tokens from being played because they are being played by card effects, so specific floodgates and removal cards that can just slow down or stop the deck outright. Then the deck also doesn't have the best of protections at times, so it might even be hard to keep your main Digimon around, which is a big problem because all of the power is coming from the fact that your main stack is going to be interacting with your tokens. So all of these together do make it so it struggles in specific matchups, and unfortunately, on top of that, a lot of the tools are kind of outdated, which sometimes is a good thing because that means that we get some really broken usage on some of the older style of effects, but it means that we also don't necessarily have some of the more modern effects to allow us to keep up with the opponent at times. But in spite of those weaknesses, that doesn't stop him from being a really fun deck to want to build and play. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile and see what we're working with. So you could just think about utilizing the classic all Sumimon lineup in terms of what you want out of your eggs because of the unidentified type synergy on top of the same name synergy that the Sumimon eggs are generally playing around with. But instead, I'm actually looking at the egg for a more mechanical aspect, and that's why I'm going to be running 4 copies of the Doraemon, because he has a nice all-turns inheritable ability where once per turn, when another Digimon with a blocker is deleted, it could be ours, it could be the opponent's, it doesn't matter, then we're going to be gaining a memory, which just helps us with some memory efficiency. Then when it comes to the level 3s, I'm going to be running an all Caramon lineup. So the old Caramon from BT2 is a really powerful card for today's standards because he has a really good inheritable ability that doesn't trigger once per turn, where when you play another Digimon with the same name as this Digimon, then we get to draw 1. So every single time in our Diaboromon stack, we're going to basically spawn a Diaboromon token, we get to draw a card, and if we're on average going to try to spawn 2 to 3 tokens a turn or an action, that means with this inheritable ability, we're going to be drawing 2 to 3 extra times, which just allows the deck to be that much more consistent when we're getting into our high stage Digimon. Then I'm also going to be running 4 copies of the BT5 Caramon. So BT5 Caramon is going to be the deck's dedicated digging or searching tool for our other unidentified traded Digimon and our main tamer, which is going to be Arata Sonata. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the brand new EX6 Caramon, which is another digging or searching tool similar to BT5, except he's a little bit better because even though he's digging less, he can potentially hit more targets because he's looking for a tamer or option card with a Diaboromon in its text and 1 unidentified traded card from among them. and we get to trash the rest. Then he even comes with an on-delete inheritable ability where he's going to basically create a Diaboromon token, which is pretty nice at maintaining a field and being able to have alternative ways at spawning our Diaboromon tokens. And then when it comes to the level 4s, I'm going to be running basically a huge toolbox menagerie of the best Kurisarimons that we currently have. I'm going to be focusing mainly on the BT2 and BT5 Kurisarimons as the main Kurisarimons I want to see in my primary stack because of just what they're doing for the deck. So the BT2 Kurisarimon is similar to the BT2 Caramon, where every single time we're going to be basically playing a Diaboromon token when we're in our Diaboromon, then we're going to be gaining a memory instead of drawing a card, and if we have both, then, well, we obviously do both, and that could generate a whole lot of extra resources that could really swing the tides in our favor to make our cards that much more efficient to use. Then I'm also going to be using the BT5 one because it's going to be the primary card to help set up our Tamer, because when we Digivolve into this card, if we don't already have our Errata Sonata Tamer set up, then we get to play one for free, which is really nice, so that way we could use our Tamer more efficiently. Then on top of that, the inheritable ability is also really insane because during your turn, all of your Digimon with the same name as this Digimon gains Rush, which we're going to be using with our Diaboromon to make all of our Diaboromon tokens have that Rush ability, allowing us to have that extra offensive possibility. Then I'm also going to be running 2 copies of the brand new EX06 Kurisarimon. So this is pretty good because when this Digimon would be played from our hand, we get to delete one of our other unidentified traded Digimon to reduce the play cost by 3. Then he even has an on-play and when Digivolving ability, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 3 or less, which is really important at being able to snipe those pesky floodgates that could potentially stop some of our plays from even happening. Then he also has an inheritable ability similar to the EX06 Kurisarimon with an on-delete to just create a Diaboromon token, which is, again, still pretty nice. Not as good as the BT5 or BT2's inheritables, but not bad nonetheless, especially for a secondary stack that it's allowing us to set up pretty easily. Then the last champion of the deck is just going to be 2 copies of the promo Kurisarimon. So this is technically the second promo Kurisarimon, and this is in here just for its inheritable ability to give our Digimon with the same name as this Digimon the Decoy Black and White ability, so we actually have some built-in protections, so we could have our tokens have the decoy effect to protect our main stack. And then when it comes to the level 5s, we do have some flexibility when it comes to our level 5s, but the main one that we definitely want to be focusing on is going to be 4 copies of the EX6 Infamon. So this is a really strong card because it has the flexibility on how we could use it due to the fact that it has an on-play and when Digivolving ability, where we get to delete one of our Digimon with Diaboromon in its name, so ideally a Diaboromon token that we've already created as sacrificial fodder to use the ability where this Digimon can then Digivolve into a Diaboromon from our hand for free, which is just really nice at being able to have efficient ways to climb up our stack, especially if we don't necessarily care about that Diaboromon token or we just so happen to have one on our field. Then it also has a really strong inheritable ability, which is the primary pull for us wanting to use this card because during all turns, when one of your Digimon with Diaboromon in its name is played, then we get to de-Digivolve one on one of the opponent's Digimon, which is just really strong levels of disruption towards what the opponent can do, and the fact that we can create tokens during the opponent's turn as well as ours to utilize and abuse this type of ability. Then when it comes to the other level 5s, it kind of just doesn't matter what they are as long as they're doing something positive for the deck. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stick in engine and in archetype. I am just because I want to make the deck a little bit more efficient, but we could look at outside level 5s as well. It just, again, doesn't matter because EX6 is the one we want to use more often than not. So I'm just electing to use 2 copies of the BT5 Infamon because it's a warper, so we could use our Caramon to go up into an Infamon for a cost of 4. Then it also has a really decent inheritable ability where it's just that on delete ability to create a Diaboromon token. Then I'm also going to be running 2 copies of the BT2 Infamon because it's just a pretty simple card to use at reducing the Digivolution cost by 1 when we're Digivolving into our Diaboromon, so it can make our Diaboromon that much more efficient to use when we're going up into them. And speaking of our Diaboromons, we have some pretty decent Diaboromons that we're going to be using. So right now, that's going to be mostly focused on the EX06 Diaboromon because this card is absolutely fantastic, because at the start of our main phase and when we Digivolve up into him, we get to play out a Diaboromon token. So the fact that we can constantly spawn Diaboromon tokens is really. Then he has an all-turn set ability that only triggers once per turn, where when an opponent's Digimon is played, we get to activate its when Digivolving effect to be able to spawn a token, so we have more ways to be able to spawn Diaboromon tokens thanks to this ability, on top of the fact that the other All Turns ability states that all of our other Diaboromon named Digimon gain jamming and blocker, so that's kind of where my egg choice is coming from, is the fact that when I'm using my Diaboromon, more specifically this one, all of my tokens will have blocker, so when I sacrifice my tokens or they just get deleted to something, that allows me to gain a memory there, which just increases the level of efficiency and disruption on my cards as a whole, thanks to, well, the EX06 Diaboromon. And then the other Diaboromon that I'm going to be running is going to be 3 copies of Diaboromon Ace. So Diaboromon Ace, yes, is an Ace Digimon, which makes the BT5 Infamon actually pretty decent because we could have a Kurisarimon on our field, warp into our Infamon, and then line up an Ace play that way to be able to try to bait the opponent. It's not necessarily the best type of a stack for Diaboromon Ace, but it's just a way to be able to use him more efficiently because of his hand counter blast Digivolution ability. Then he has a really strong when Digivolving and when attacking ability that's not limited to once per turn, so if we want to use him more proactively, then that option is available to us as well, where we get to play a Diaboromon token. So it's just another way to spawn and constantly generate those tokens for us to use, and we already know with all of our inheritable abilities, we could do lots of crazy things when we're spawning Diaboromon tokens. Then during all turns, once per turn, when an effect plays another Digimon, whether it's our Digimon or the opponent's, it doesn't matter, we can delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 3 or lower, and for each Diaboromon we have on our field, we get to add 2 to the maximum play cost this card can reach, which is just really good constant removal because we could trigger this during our turn and the opponent's turn, and if we combo this with Digivolve, then we could put the opponent's Digimon quite easily in range of this ability to remove them as efficiently as we can. And then when it comes to the level 7s and the last mega of the deck, I'm just going to keep it simple and run 2 copies of Armageddon just because we could sacrifice our Diaboromon tokens to basically reduce the play cost by 12, making him a 3-cost mega that we could just hard play and start swinging with because he has the rush ability attached to him, and then he even has a really powerful all turns ability where when Digivolving effects of the opponent's level 7 Digimon don't activate, which can really shut down specific level 7s, and that is just very powerful because it makes those types of cards useless for the opponent. Then, when it comes to the Tamers, I'm just, again, going to be keeping it pretty simple and running 4 copies of our main Tamer, which is Arata Sonata. So he has the ability where at the start of our turn, if we have an unidentified traded Digimon in our trash, then we get to gain 1 memory, which it's not hard to get an unidentified in our trash because, well, that's the majority of the deck. And we even have the Caramon from EX06 that's helping set this up as well because the rest of the cards that we searched off of them go into our trash. So he's just going to constantly generate some extra memory, and the more we have of him, the more memory we're going to have to play with. But the primary reason why we really need to see and set up our errata sonatas is because when one of our Digimon digivolves into a Diaboromon, we get to suspend him to create a Diaboromon token. So our Diaboromons are already spawning a token themselves, and, well, the more erratas we have, the more tokens we're able to spawn, and that allows us to, well, do more. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be one copy of BT4 Izzy. So this is kind of a tech or flex spot. It could really be whatever you feel like you want it to be, but Izzy is still just decent for being a generic memory setting tamer and also helping with the deck's consistency because we get to check the top 3 cards of our deck and basically put them back in any order on the top, which is really nice. And if all of those cards that we checked were black, then he gains us a memory, so he's effectively a 3-cost tamer instead of a 4-cost tamer, or if he's checked out of the security, it can actually anti-tempo the opponent, which is really nice, especially when the majority of our deck now is finally black, where compared to before, it wasn't necessarily all black, which made this card a little bit worse. Then when it comes to the options, I'm just, again, keeping it simple with just running some of the best options that we have to work with. So I'm going to be running 2 copies of Black Memory Boost and 2 copies of Defensive Training, again, because they're just the generic searching tools for black cards, on top of the fact that they both help with access at utilizing our memory more efficiently with their delay abilities when we need to. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Catastrophe Cannon. This is just, I guess, the, in quotation marks, removal slot, just because we get to de-digivolve 2 on one of the opponent's Digimon, which is pretty decent. It's not necessarily hard removal, but the soft removal is pretty good, especially when it comes with a nice ability where if we have a Diaboromon in play, then we get to play a Diaboromon token, which is pretty decent because that can combo with our Diaboromon Ace to be able to then trigger the delete ability because we played a Digimon by an effect. And then the security ability also activates its main, so it could also helps generate some extra tokens during our turn as well. But for the most part, that's pretty much it for the deck. I think that the deck definitely got a lot better with the EX06 tools, just because we now can utilize some of the older tools more effectively because we have just, well, better quality cards to coincide with it. And there's still just a whole bunch of other useful tech and tools that you could think about building the deck towards, because we do have the flexibility on it, because we do have both generic supports and archetype supports that we could be playing around with, depending on your expected meta, the cards you have access to, and utilizing the abilities that you want to prioritize. And it's not like the deck is dead in the water either, because we do know that there is going to be some future support for the deck, because we know we're getting a brand new evolution line in BT17 to help the deck more directly, and we do know that Arisa is the indirect support because she's going to be interacting with tokens being played, which is one of the primary things that Diaboromon is doing, allowing the deck to actually have some extra legs in the future.